thank you for coming on the show. I know we've been trying to make this happen for a while now, haven't we?
Yes, we have. Eventually we're here, so we're good to go.
So the question I ask everyone when they come on, the first question is, why guitar for you?
Yeah, well, obviously it was just around about the time when everything was happening, really. You know, I do talk about being very fortunate to have been born in 1951. I think that's really quite special, simply because by the time I was coming of an age, you know, 13, 14, 15, you know, and your focus starts to go out of the school playground or mucking around with your mates, you know, into other things. You have this awareness, you know, that there's this great entity called music in the world. And then you start to unravel and think, where do I fit in? What is good for me? You know, what sounds good to me? What attracts me? You know. And then obviously you're still at school. And it was absolutely perfect. It was probably, in fact, I've still got the album, John Mayall's Blues Breakers, with Eric Clapton. I think that was released in 1964. And so it was just around about that time, you have this awareness, you know, of music and what's happening. And you catch glimpses on the television of some bands that attract you, you know, like very early Rolling Stones or the Trogs or early Kinks, you know, and stuff like that. And you start to become a bit captivated, and then you got great bands probably in 65 coming along like the Cream, you know, and you start to, and it starts to become a bit kind of, not trendy, but kind of some of the school kids would come to school with LPs, you know, because you could play them in the break on the turntable. And so you start to decipher exactly where you fit in musically, you know. So there's not really any short answers to a lot of these questions, because it was, I think it's very intriguing, really, because it was the very beginning where everything, the transition was being made for people like the blue collar, working class snot kid, you know what I mean, that didn't seem to fit in, you know, with the pop or the jazz or the classical or something, yeah. You know, so we had to create something for ourselves, and eventually it created a springboard for me to want to get involved, simply because there wasn't an abundance of this style of music that attracted me, and it wasn't the blues, you know. I loved it and liked it, and it was a big attraction, which kick-started the evolution of the musical journey that I got on, that went from blues to progressive blues to rock, hard rock, and heavy metal. And this transitional period of about, you know, 10 years was quite a magical and very interesting concept and phenomenon, really. You know, so there's lots to talk about, so I'll let you ask a question.
No, there is lots to talk about, and you're right that the year that you were born, you were coming of age for the most magical time in music, for sure. And, you know, it was all new, and there were these groundbreaking artists that were coming through, like Clapton and Hendrix, and a little bit later Zeppelin and all of that. So, and of course, you guys were the ones that were part of that as well, a little bit later. So it's obviously the Beano album, was it, that kind of kicked, that kind of really kind of resonated with you. So I guess, and you mentioned the kind of working class and kind of where you were growing up, which is obviously the West Country, and that kind of became synonymous with heavy metal. How much of kind of where you grew up and the music you were listening to kind of really shaped, I guess, what you become and kind of the birth of heavy metal?
People do ask that, because obviously traveling the world as much as I have done, obviously Birmingham, the Midlands and that area, you know, obviously Birmingham being the second largest city in the country, people have heard of it overseas, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, you're from Birmingham, England. You know, if you mention Walsall or West Bromwich, they go, or Dudley, they wouldn't have a clue, you know. So we have to say, yeah, Birmingham. But we're from that general area, you know, Priest and Sabbath and Zeppelin guys, and you know, and there are others, you know. But it is known as the heavy metal capital of the world, so we kind of stick with that, you know. But whether the industry and the black country and everything, the factories and the foundries growing up, all my family, my granddad's worked in factories or foundries, you know, because it was the heart of the, you know, industrial revolution up this neck of the woods, you know. And obviously everybody had a family that worked in that industry, you know, chain making or, you know, steel and stuff like that. And obviously I had my share of that as well, you know. I also worked in, you know, I'm proud to have worked in a factory. Why not? You know, because
why not? It shapes you, doesn't it?
You know,
that's why you're who you are.
Metals, yeah, exactly. Metals in the veins, it's in the blood. So, but it's interesting, you know, as much as we would, going to school, walking to school, whatever, we would hear the big hydraulic hammers pumping, and we would pass these facilities, you know, steel making facilities, and see all the sparks and all the iron being poured. But that was just a part of life. But whether it actually had anything to do with us, the music, I think the main probably thing was the fact that we were pretty impoverished, you know. We didn't have anything. It was rough. It was tough, the upbringing. And I always kind of make the connection because, you see, a lot of guys who were probably born in, let's say, not 1951, but maybe 1950 or 49 or 48. And I'm talking about people like, you know, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, and, you know, lots and lots of others that had, you know, I'd discovered the blues, you know, these great blues artists, as I did at a very young age. And we would endeavour to go and see these artists, listen to the material, you know, whether it was Robert Johnson, Sonny Terry, Brown and McGee, you know, Howlin' Wolf, the list went on. And that was great. But for me, I was really blessed when I heard some other artists not playing the blues, but like special kind of riff-orientated songs is the story that I tell. Yeah. You know, for example, in 1965, the Kinks came out with a song called You Really Got Me, and I'm thinking to myself, why do I like this song? I'm attracted to this song. This is a pop band. They're in the charts all the time. Why do I like it? You know, and it's the same with Wild Thing by the Trogs, you know, and certainly when Hendrix came out with Foxy Lady and Purple Haze, I'm thinking, I like this, you know, and also some very early Stone stuff, even though they endeared themselves to a lot of blues music. Some of the songs were kind of dark and enigmatic and kind of, I was attracted to them, you know.
Yeah, I guess, but that's kind of like what you did. Like you liked the blues, and then you kind of then had that kind of training of the blues, and then took it on your own kind of.
No.
Do you not think? Okay, go on, tell me.
No, because I auditioned for Judas Priest, who were looking for a blues guitar player, and I didn't get the gig because I wasn't a blues guitar player.
Oh, okay, right, okay. So what kind of...
This is what you need to understand, is the fact I skipped that.
Did you like more Hendrix and... Did you not think Hendrix is kind of a bit
Hendrix was everything. It was everything.
Hendrix.
It was
Hendrix was God, sorry.
and this is why it was a life-changing experience to go and see him, you know, because everything he did, he was kind of the all-in-one everything, you know. So because basically I liked the blues, but I didn't play 12-bar blues, any variation of them.
Okay, so what did you play then?
When I first when I did get together with Judas Priest, eventually, I failed the audition. But eventually, because I was playing, you see, when Cream did Crossroads, which is a standard,
Yeah.
but they took the 3-minute version and turned it into a 5-6 minute version live. They obviously added ingredients, improvised solos, so that became progressive blues.
Yeah. Got you.
But so if you take a band like Fleetwood Mac, you know, because I could talk all day on the subject, really. I really could. When Peter Green stepped in, you know, from the Beano album to take Clapton's place, yeah, he did the blues with John Mayall because that's what John Mayall did himself too, you know, and that was great.
Yeah.
But the reason for leaving is because Peter Green could hear progressions from blues music.
Yeah.
And his progressions, listen to the great Peter Green, be a progressive blues player, creating great progressive blues songs like Albatross, The Green Manalishi, Oh Well, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
They're blues, but it's a progression on blues, which is wonderful.
Which is how music should be, shouldn't it? It should keep evolving.
Yeah, but the thing is, when we went out as Judas Priest, because I skipped the blues thing, because I was already listening to bands that had already progressed from the blues, like the Cream, you know, Peter Green, Jimi Hendrix. I could hear all of this that was going on with all of these great bands, and there was tons of them, you know.
Yeah.
Even like most of the great bands, whether, I mean, Bloodwind Pig, Jethro Tull, Rory Gallagher, you know, there's so many of the bands that were progressing on the blues theme, you know, and but they hadn't. There wasn't a thing called heavy metal. There wasn't a thing called heavy rock. There wasn't a thing called hard rock. Actually, when I started in the 60s, there wasn't even a thing called rock.
Was it just still rock and roll, wasn't it?
It was progressive blues, because people used to book us. They go, oh, Judas Priest, but what do they play? Oh, we'll put them down as a progressive blues band. But we weren't. Not to my mind, because we weren't playing, you know, 1-4-5 or any version or any versions of a 12-bar blues ever.
But do you know what I love the evolution of Priest, though, and I love that, like, you listen to your debut album and just almost every album, just how you were growing as a band and your sound, and I think it's wonderful when a band does that. Because
so we weren't in a band because we didn't have a singer, but when Alan Atkins, who had auditioned me, probably about a year late, because they did find a blues guitar player, Ernie Chatterway, and they went touring for about a year, and it didn't work out. And then myself, Ian, and our drummer, John, we were just playing improvised solos and doing whatever we were doing, you know. It certainly wasn't blues. It may have been a variation on blues. Whatever it was, Alan Atkins said, can I join the band? Are you looking for a singer? And we said yes, and we became Judas Priest. And straight away, we sat down, myself and Alan Atkins, and started to write music that wasn't blues.
Yeah.
Because the blues wasn't the future for me.
No, and it wasn't, was it?
What we were doing, you know, and straight away we started to do things that became Victim of Changes, and Winter Retreat, and Never Satisfied, and Run of the Mill, and all of these songs. That's what we started to create. And then when we went out and played gigs, if we didn't have enough songs, we would do some covers by obscure bands that weren't blues bands.
Right. Okay.
Not to me. Bands like Quatermass.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Different.
So we would play Black Sheep of the Family and stuff like that, you know, that to me weren't blues songs. occasionally we would throw in Spanish Castle Magic later on, you know, and I would play that, and I didn't consider that to be a blues song because it wasn't. So I wasn't intentionally trying to not play blues, but it's not what I wanted to do because everybody else was doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Even the progressive blues bands, it was a progression on blues, you know. So it was a little bit intertwined. But can you see where I'm coming from? I had got on the I'd started the evolutionary trail to rock, which came about in the 70s, because Led Zeppelin were called a rock band, you know. Some people started to be called a rock band. You see, we didn't have rock until probably about 1970. We had rock and roll, but that was Elvis and Bill Haley. Yeah. So we progressed from blues to progressive blues to rock and hard rock. All of these genres didn't exist, you see.
No, and then you were the first one to embrace heavy metal.
But we became Judas Priest. Oh, they're a progressive blues band. We'll book them in 1969. We'll book them as a progressive blues band because rock and hard rock and heavy metal didn't exist.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So this is what we need to get our head around. And then when rock existed, we got booked out as a rock band. And then when hard rock got, existed, we became a hard rock and then a heavy rock. And then a heavy metal band. So because of the music we were creating and by then recording, we were kind of get responsible for these new genres, these new labels to be attached to bands, assisted, aided and abetted. Well, not just that. Other great bands were a part of that as well. Bands like Black Sabbath. When I heard that first Black Sabbath album, I thought, thank God somebody else out there in another location has got the heavy metal in the blood.
Do you think when you heard Sabbath, could you really relate? You could really relate to it then?
Absolutely. We were doing something different, but at least what Sabbath were doing it sounded more like heavy metal to me, even though that didn't exist at the time. We have to remember that. Heavy metal, that phrase came in, correct me if I'm wrong, in around about 76, 77, something like that.
Well, it was first kind of heard in the Steppenwolf track, wasn't it? And then the press started using it, and so the theory goes anyway.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly when that song Born to Be War came out, but the press being the press, but the press are like musicians. The press are always looking for different new phrases and terminologies that they can come out. Because it's like writers are always looking for, new concepts and wordology as the same as musicians
and
are.
Labels as well. I guess that's so you're heavy metal, you fit into there, or you go there, and it's like
it becomes a trend, whatever you want to call it. But lucky for us, it became an accurate description of what we were actually doing, really.
Were you completely self-taught?
I would say yes. In the very early days, in the 60s, I had a couple of lessons. And I might say 2, because I didn't have money to pay for lessons,
Yeah.
So I did. I taught myself.
That's incredible. And I guess you were practicing non-stop, just like listening to records and then trying to figure it all out.
I did, but like I say, in respect of getting onto, I'd like to be able to help and assist younger, newer players or even older players to try and get on the right track in respect of trying to get better faster, and there are lots of mistakes. Lots of mistakes that I made, we all made,
Like what? Can you?
Well, first of all, I didn't know, and we didn't know, that when you go out and buy an instrument, you don't really know how it's supposed to feel. and how it's supposed to be. We need to make the instrument as easy to play as we possibly can. I struggled along, burning my fingers to hell on a £10 acoustic guitar, with probably 10s or 11s to 58s or something, and to try and hold down a bar chord. This is when most people give up. We have to stop that. Buy yourself a guitar, and I would suggest, whatever it is, detune the guitar a tone or as much as so the fingers, it feels comfortable to you. Make the action. We all buy guitars and the action's way too high, so it's hard, and the notes go out of tune when we're pressing down. Let's get something simple. Go out there and buy a Fender Squier, for example, for £100 off eBay or something like that, and get a set of 9s or even 8s on there, which I use.
Okay.
And buy a guitar that's been set up by a decent player, and find out how the guitar's supposed to feel, and it's more comfortable and easy to play, so you don't get all of these calluses, and you can form the chords, so that's the number one rule. That's the number one. Don't make that mistake. Let's get the instrument comfortable, and if you like to play, if it's got heavier strings on but it's still hard to play, there's no problem with detuning it. Most great players, even detune their guitars now, like whether it's Richie, whether it's Ingve or myself, we all go down a half step. I've been down a whole step in the past, and obviously a lot of the metal players go down even further, which I've done also.
And that's really good advice, actually, because you're right. There's apart from the fact of all the kind of struggles that you go through when you first start playing, because obviously I've only been playing for a year now. This was kind of like something I set up during lockdown, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And there's something, obviously you get the calluses and bar chords was when I kind of was like, I want to give up. And actually I've given up on bar chords and I'm just focusing on all of the other stuff for now. And I'm told that's what a lot of people do when they get to bar chords. But
yeah, it doesn't have to be as arduous as you think.
Yeah.
If you just, like I say, I would probably if you're going to start to learn to play a guitar, if you buy an acoustic, it's one-dimensional. It can be hard to play if it's not set up right. If it's a nylon string, you've got probably a better chance. But the thing is, you're only going to get one kind of sound and everything. And learners, if they do find it a bit difficult to start with, can give up very, very quickly. So I would suggest if you buy something like, for example, a Fender Squier, buy a little amp that's got effects in there, it's got delay, reverb, so you can have some fun with it,
Yeah.
And if you want to try your hand at a bit of lead playing and sounding like your favourite artist, whoever that might be, and you've got the whammy bar you can play with, especially if it's got a locking system. Have some fun with that, and do the dive bombs and all of these different characteristics and dimensions you can get out of this bit of kit will probably keep your interest a lot better, really.
That's the thing. Yeah, you're right. Okay, some good advice there. Thank you. And of course, an instrument that is known as being your kind of thing is the Flying V, which you were kind of playing when no one else was playing. Why did you choose the V?
Just simply, it looked like something I've just got to have. Because to me, bear in mind, I'm this young kid, just a young teenager, wanting to hear more of this music that I'd heard little bits of, but I was very hungry and frustrated that I didn't have enough of it, that I was compelled to create it, because it didn't exist, because I wanted more of it. I'm thinking, okay, I'll sit down and write the music that I want to listen to, and hope there's lots more people out there like me that will adhere to this music, that will do for us, you know, white working class kids, it'll do for us what kind of the blues music did, you know, for the people that were suffering, and it helped them through their working class day and their oppression. Maybe this music can do the same for us.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what heavy metal is to me around the world. And it brought us all together because we can relate to it, you know. So it's a very, very interesting subject, you know, and it's why it's been created, you know, because if you don't have the creators, you're not going to have the audience that are going to decide, I like that. So you have to create it first.
Yeah.
So when you
hope that the audience, and hope there is someone that likes it.
Yeah, so to me, we had, outside of the great progressive blues bands, which I've named a million of them, and they were great, we had the next step of Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, the Scorpions, UFO, you know, Accept. And so you have all of these bands, and eventually the new wave of them, whoever that might be, you know, starts to come in as well. And obviously you have the Iron Maiden, Saxon, and you have the next level of the so-called new wave of British heavy metal bands.
Yeah.
So this is the interesting concept. But like I said, this is why I'm glad and feel so blessed that to be born in 51. The beginning of heavy metal had to happen just around about the time that I was like 16, 17, let's say, you know, 18, that period, to want to be able to create this for other people to want to be able to listen to it.
Which they did, which is great. Hence why we're still here chatting after all these years, which is incredible. Yeah. And you've got a new record that's just come out. So tell me about KK's Priest and the new album.
Yeah. I love it. I love the energy. I love everything about it. And I also love the fact that I think it's absolutely, you know, indicative, synonymous, you know, relative to everything that I've done in my life, really, in respect to heavy metal. It's a combination of songs that take you on a journey, you know, through, probably through the decades, really, of the creating of heavy metal. There's been times when I've been a progressive blues artist, even though I wasn't, but maybe some of it was. I've been a rock artist. I've been a hard rock artist. I've been a heavy rock artist, and I've been a heavy metal artist. Because through the journey, through the decades, you know, things don't stay the same. They keep moving, don't they? So, you know,
we could argue that maybe some of the time you were almost like a pop rock artist when Turbo came out, and you experimented with synths and all of that. What was it called? That machine that you used was a Phantom something that you used to create those sounds on that album.
Yeah, well, obviously someone created a piece of kit which was essentially a synthesizer, but that could convert the digital signal into an analog signal, so that we could have that facility on a guitar, you know, to pick up the analog signal, convert it to a digital signal that would then create the sounds of what any keyboard could do, basically. But obviously that was very interesting at the time, and still is, you know, because we reverted back to that. I used the synth guitar again to write and stuff on the album, the Nostradamus album, for example, which was classically, you know, orientated. So yeah, that was all very interesting. But you know, like I say, this great evolution of rock and metal and everything in between, you know, I'm very proud to have been a part of. You know, I'm part of, you know, it's wonderful for me to have been a part of the evolution, to be able to be one of the creators, you know, not just an observer, you know.
No, I can imagine. It's brilliant. I mean, yeah. But who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want, as a guitarist, to have your own sound? That's what every guitarist is trying to achieve, isn't it? Be able to go, well, that's my blueprint there, and there we go. So
obviously, Sermons of the Sinner, I like to think it's very up to date, but it's also it's reminiscent of classic metal, you know, and what we call true metal in there as well. And I'm happy to bring some of my heritage and my legacy with me into the present and take it into the future. So I'd like to invite everybody to check it out, Sermons of the Sinner by Judas Priest. I think it's an essential part of the collection for any metal fan out there.
So tell me about the making of it. Like, where did you guys record it? And I mean, and let's talk about who's in the band as well, because that's
because of the lockdown, we're all forced to work at home. But luckily, I've got a music room here, which is a great facility. And there's not a lot I can't do. Obviously, we have to go into the studio for the drums, you know, and I put the heavy guitars down, you know, when we reamped a lot of the guitars. So that was great. But yeah, it wasn't too much of an encumbrance, really. We made our way through it.
And I heard that some of the riffs that were on this album were riffs that you'd come up in the 80s with, maybe, and maybe didn't make a Priest record.
Yeah. There's only a couple. I mean,
which ones?
I don't know. I'll have to go back and have a listen. But there was a track on the opening track, Hellfire Thunderbolt. There was a riff I introduced on Nostradamus, actually, when I thought it was underused and it should have been, made more of, you know. So I was happy to reintroduce that, you know, because, like I say, I want to bring, I will go back and listen to some of the stuff that I dug out, because obviously, as a guitar player, I've got this nice archive of ideas, you know, that go back, and there probably was a couple of ideas that, and you have to go back and check, you know, what is there that wasn't accepted in Judas Priest, for example. I mean, a good example would be from the Angel of Retribution album.
Well, that was the bass on the Revolution track, wasn't it?
Which was, that was an idea that I had lying around for a long time, but also Judas Rising, that was something myself and Rob did I think it was in the early 80s, when we were at a recording studio in Florida, I seem to remember. And so we were working on that, but it didn't get accepted into the fold. But I reintroduced the idea, because I always thought it was a cool idea, in the 90s. In the 2000s, 2004, when Rob came back into the band after 12 or 14 years. I reintroduced it, and unfortunately, this time I was able to make it fly. And yeah, I like the song a lot, Judas Rising. Old idea, made good, and it's an old idea now, because it was 2004 now, but actually the original concept was around about 83.
You know, I was chatting to Roy Z, and this was a while ago, and he was telling me about the Angels of Retribution. I can't get my words out. Angels of Retribution.
Angel of Retribution, yeah.
There we go. Put my tongue back in. He was telling me that when you were recording that record, I think it was in Birmingham, parts of it, wasn't it? He actually went and drank some of the water from the river, because he was hoping that he's like, there's something in the water up there. And so he said, I drank some of it and I was hoping that it would make me more metal.
Yeah, he probably didn't tell you the story when I took him a case of extra strength Carlsberg there, and Roy, you know the story, but anyway, that's another story. I'll let Roy tell you that story, but ask Roy about it.
What was the story? Tell me.
Yeah, so now Roy will tell you the story, but Roy got into trouble. We did have to appoint a lawyer for him, but everything was fine.
I didn't know that one.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm only telling this story because Roy's famous. He's a great songwriter. You know, he's done an awful lot for rock. Roy, I do believe that Rob has an awful lot to thank Roy for, because Roy got Rob back on the track with making some great songs, you know, with his songwriting. Roy is a full-on metal dude, and is a great buddy. I'll let him tell you the stories, but there are many. But no, I didn't. I campaigned to call that album Judas Rising, you know, but unfortunately, I didn't win that one. So there's another unique story for you. But on this podcast alone, KK wanted to call the album Judas Rising because Rob was back. I thought the album was good, and the artwork and everything. But there you go.
That title kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Like you say, because Rob was
absolute sense.
Like, yeah,
absolute sense. You know, because I didn't feel we were in an angry place or wanted retribution in any way, shape, or form. So I thought that, there was a feel-good factor. You know, don't get me wrong, Ripper is a great singer, but it was just, you know, fan demand to have the voice, what was considered, and understandably, the voice of Judas Priest back in the band. So, you know, for that reason, I did feel that we were being elevated at that time, you know, and so Judas Rising made a lot of sense.
And I would have been able to say it as well, so it would have been much.
Pronounce it a lot easier.
Yeah.